Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, I want to start a business. I hear setting it up as an LLC is best. What do you think is the best business entity when it's just me in the business? Ooh, I get that question a lot, and it's a really good question. There are certain things that you should consider when setting up your business because each entity has its advantages and disadvantages. And again, depending on the size of the business, and this is a person who's doing it by herself, makes a difference. So let's look at the four most common business types. Sole proprietor, which is actually by far the most common. Sole proprietorship is a simple process. You usually go down to your county clerk, you file the paperwork, you pay a fee, and you are in business. Now, what are the advantages of a sole proprietorship? It's super simple. It's easy. You file some papers, you pay a fee, you're in business. There's no separation of the business and you, meaning it does not have to file taxes separately. It does not have to file paperwork or have, all these extra documents to submit. It's you. You file a Schedule C at the end of your regular tax return, and it's added to it. So what are the disadvantages? I think the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages when you're talking about a sole proprietorship. So a sole proprietorship, again, there's no separation between it and you. So any liability it creates, and when we talk about liabilities, most people only think of being sued, right? And being sued is a real thing, right? If somebody sues you because the product harmed them, or someone falls in your establishment, or whatever the case is, and you get sued, there's no separation between your assets and the business assets, which means they're going after you personally, and all of your assets are in jeopardy if you lose. And that goes for your spouse's assets too, because those are part of your assets. So not only if you get sued for something like that, but creditors. If the business runs up a debt and for some reason the business can't pay, you are responsible for that debt because there's no separation between you and the business. On top of that, you cannot sell a sole proprietorship. You can't sell it. It's you. It can't be passed on to the next generation, so it's not heritable. It's a simple business structure, but to me, it is a lazy person's business structure. There's no tax advantage. Actually, it could be a tax disadvantage. There's no liability protection. There's no way to sell it once you're tired of the business. There's no way to pass it on to future generations. So I think a sole proprietorship is a horrible business entity that really no one in the modern time should be using. So yeah, LLC is better than that. And then we have a general partnership. Now, a general partnership is exactly like a sole proprietorship, except there is more than one person. So if you have two or multiple people who decide to get into business together and go down to the county clerk and file some documents and pay, I believe it's the same fee in most states, you're operating as a partnership, except the difference is you have just expanded your liability, because anything that one person in that partnership does, you're responsible for as well. So there's no separation between the group and the business's liabilities, the business's debts. Again, still can't be sold, still can't be passed on to future generations. So that's probably the absolute worst business structure, hands down, right? Because all the problems you had with a sole proprietorship, you magnify and multiply with a general partnership. So let's get into the other structures that are probably more appropriate. So we have what we call a C corporation. A C corporation, or a corporation, most people just call it a corporation, but it's a C corporation. You file with the state and not your county, right? So you incorporate within a county in a state, so you have to usually register with your state department. And you file articles of incorporation, you pay a fee, The difference is there are certain obligations and responsibilities to act as a corporation. Otherwise, you don't get the protections of a corporation. They say it's piercing the corporate veil. You must have an annual meeting. You must have officers. But the officers can be one person. So what people don't understand, one person can be a C Corp. You can be your entire board of directors. You can be you can be your president and your treasurer and your secretary. You can be all those things as an individual if you're 18 years or older. It has a great liability protection. It is a separate entity. It's like an alter ego. It has its own tax obligations separate from yours, and it has a lower tax rate than you probably will because it's 21% on its net, not gross, which means after you spend whatever you have to spend, you only get taxed on what's left over, and at 21% flat. So if you have zero left over, zero taxes, right? If you have negative left over, the negative carries over to the next year. So in terms of tax benefits, a C Corp by far has a greater benefit than any other entity. And some people say double taxation, and that's not even true. It's a separate taxation. If you pay yourself a salary, that is a deduction for the corporation. It doesn't pay taxes on that. So it's not double taxation. It just moves the taxation over to you as an individual. Liability protection, like I said, is great. A corporation can do anything that an individual can do. It can have a job. It can hire. It can borrow money. It can lend money. It can invest. It can be invested in. It can do pretty much anything that an individual can do, except it separates you from that. So you're shielded from the liabilities created from the corporation. There are, like I said, you have to have a separate bank account, has to have a separate EIN, has to keep corporate minutes of its annual meeting, which is mandatory. So there are some greater obligations and responsibilities if you're going to act like a corporation to get the benefits of a corporation. As an individual, is it a good structure? Absolutely, it's a good structure. You can be an individual, and it's a good structure. Now, some people say, well, what about an S corporation? And an S corporation is a C corporation who filed documents with the IRS to be not taxed separately like a corporation, but to have it taxed as a flow-through, meaning all the profits or losses flow through to an individual who's running the corporation. So you still set it up the exact same way, but you take away the tax advantages that you have as a C corporation for a different tax structure as an S corporation, but everything else remains the same. And then the question was an LLC. So what is an LLC? A limited liability company. A limited liability company LLCs have only been around since the 1990s, so they're relatively new. They are a hybrid between a general partnership and a corporation. So it has all the earmarks of a partnership, except it creates liability protection. So it has liability protection of a corporation, but it gives a lot of flexibility. So an LLC has members. You can be a single member LLC, or you can have multiple members of the LLC. Those would be like your partners. But you can designate how much profit or loss, right? What percentage each member gets. And a member could be another LLC. A member could be a corporation. A member could be a sole proprietorship. It could be an individual. It acts just like an S corporation in terms of taxes, unless you choose to have it taxed as a corporation. It is naturally by itself, by default, a flow-through entity. And like I said, all the profits and losses flow through to the individuals, who then have their own tax obligation based on what they gained or lost. So it doesn't have, you're not required to have an annual meeting. You're not required to, it's not as strict in regards to paperwork as a corporation. It absolutely should have its own business account. It absolutely should have its own EIN number. It absolutely should have annual meetings, but not required to do those things the same way a C corporation is required to do. I call it the lazy man's corporation, but if it is a good structure, whether or not it's the best structure for you, if you want to give away some of the tax benefits because you don't want the hassle of having an annual meeting and keeping minutes, then sure, it's a great structure for you to use. It is good for some things. As if you're getting into a partnership with others and you already have a business, I think it's great because it can flow through to your business. For real estate, I think it's good as to hold real estate in terms of putting the deed in an LLC because, again, the profits and losses still flow through to you. So I think it has a place, but whether or not it's the best for a business as an individual, I don't see it being any better or necessarily any worse than a C corporation. Because a C corporation, if you wanted it to act like a flow through, you can just file for subchapter S and have it taxed like that, but you can switch it back and have all the benefits. So, and an LLC, again, you can have it taxed like a corporation if you want to. So it kind of boils down to comfortability, but LLC is not better than a C corporation. C corporation not better than LLC. They can act just like one another if you choose. I know in New York, the difference is if you have an LLC, the filing fee is higher for no reason. Filing fee is higher, same process, except you still file with the state, but they charge you more. And in New York, you're required to publish in a legal newspaper, and depending on the county that you're in, if you're within the city, that could cost you up to $2,000 extra for no reason, except that LLCs are popular. So I think kind of it boils down to really which one makes more sense for you where you live. And I think if you live in New York City, I would always go with a C corporation because, again, you can have it act like a S corporation if you choose to. But other than that, liability protection is great. The structure is, if you need flexibility and you have partners, then maybe LLC. But if you want investors, then a C corporation would be better. So, and yeah, that's pretty much in general. And there are some other subtleties, but I'd like to hear your take on it. Which do you have? Have you created a business structure? Which are you thinking about and why? But please like, share, subscribe, keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.